Tonight on The Conversation, we go from ballots to bedrooms. Patricia Duncan Sutherland lays out her political vision for Eastern St. Andrew. And then, psychologist Dr. Sidney McGill helps us unpack the emotional fallout of screen-driven intimacy and the lives being reshaped in the digital age. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Conversation. So, Miss Patricia or Mrs. Patricia Duncan Sutherland, how are you and welcome?
I am excellent and thank you very much for having me.
So we have, you are known or you've described yourself as a partner, you know, not just a politician. So what does partnership look like to you on the ground of St. Andrew Eastern?
Well, practically what it looks like is, for example, over the last 2 months, we've had a series of 20 community meetings, over 20 community meetings, where together we are building the dream, each community's dream for what they must look like in 10 years' time and what they would like to start with. And so in that partnership, I am bringing my own experience to the table, my own abilities and connections, and they are bringing their lived experiences to the table and their own qualifications to create that dream.
So how is that different from you know, what constituents have experienced under, say, the current MP, Favour Williams?
Well, my understanding from them is that they've really not had this kind of engagement where they get to design what the solutions will be. They've had maybe a few engagements. That's when there are issues and you have to meet with an agency, but not an engagement where they get to say, this is what I want. So, for example, in Augustown, they say, well, you know what happened? We want our community to be like a Cherry Gardens or a Hope Pastures. And I said, what that mean to you? I said, well, guess what happened? You see, when we come home from work, we have a lot of elderly in our community, and when we come home from work, we spend a lot of time on the road. So we want to have some benches on the roadside. We want to have some domino shacks, but we want order. We want to make sure we have enough sidewalk and our roads look good. But it must fit who we are and allow us to be able to enjoy our lives. And then they talk about their vision for their children. They want to make sure that all of their children are going to school and well-fed, and how does that work for them, etc. So together we can paint the picture of what we're going to look like.
Yeah. So this is your third electoral run for Parliament,
Yes.
but this is your first in St. Andrew Eastern.
First in St. Andrew
You know,
Eastern.
what drew you to this particular constituency, and what gives you the confidence that this is the right place and time for you?
Well, what drew me to the constituency is actually I was sought out by members of the constituency to be the representative.
Members of the constituency or members of your party?
Members of the constituency.
Oh.
Members of the constituency. Who are also members of the party, but they are the persons who live and run the constituency for the party. So they sought me out as a representative. They thought I'd be an appropriate representative. Why did I say yes? I said yes because when I looked at the constituency, my area, I am the spokesperson for social transformation and protection. It has a good mix of the socioeconomic structures of our country. We have the August Towns, your Jarrett Lane, your Hope Pastures, your Mona, your Karachi. So you have a good mix of everybody in the constituency. And so the ability to bring the country together and the constituency together and to see the social mobility occur and the creation of our middle class is a big part of the opportunity. You come to politics to make a difference, right? You know,
well, usually.
For me, usually, I should say, one should.
That's the usual assumption.
That's right. But for me, it is, because where I'm at in my life now is that I'm not looking for a job. I actually should be looking to retire more than that, than looking for a job.
You want to retire into politics?
And that's what it is. Because
So,
you have to always have a way to self-actualize, right? To give back, to make sure that you are a part of a bigger picture.
So here's what we know. You know, whether it's anecdotally or otherwise, you are not unfamiliar to that particular constituency. Perhaps not as an MP or just a regular member of the People's National Party, but you went to school in that area, that's university, and you have lived in that particular constituency. But then the question is, you ran in 2016, that's Southeast Clarendon.
Yes.
And in 2020 again, same constituency. What makes you think now, in terms of the confidence that you now have, that you can win there, as in Augusttown, that particular area?
Yes.
No.
Well, so my familiarity with the constituency causes two things, right? Because I went to university there, as well as the constituents. I would know a lot of them in my daily life. We would have grown up together, gone to party together, do business together, as well as inside of the Augusttown community in particular. My family, my sister, and I would have worked with her then, did a lot of work, and my brother as well, in the context of social transformation as well, you know? And so there is a lot of connection in that space. And my father, of course, in the politics, a lot of connection. What makes a difference now between Southeast Clarendon and Eastern St. Andrew? Two things. Southeast Clarendon is a constituency that is primarily dominated by the Jamaica Labour Party. It's the constituency of Alexander Bustamante, the constituency of Shearer, right? We had won it twice before, once with Peter Bunting, and then the next election, we won it, right? And then after that, we had not held it. So I did a lot of work there organizing and creating a good PNP organization there, right? Hopefully that my successor will be able to build on that. Because that's the whole point, right? Because when you go into politics, even as opposition, you're building an organization, you're building a sense of community. You want a reason for people to want to be involved in politics. And we're able to do quite a bit of that, because we increased the vote significantly there.
So how would that be different now than, let's say,
in Eastern St. Andrew?
Because
Eastern
I'm looking
St. Andrew now is a more marginal seat.
Well, you say marginal, but I'm thinking that, all right, so the current MP, Favour Williams, this is her second term, and she's looking for a third term, obviously. But prior to her, it would have been Andre Hilton for a bit, but then prior to him, it would have been a member of the Jamaica Labour Party.
Yes,
so
and then prior to that there was Colin Campbell.
So
it's a marginal seat that flips, and it's not usually won by more than, it's always under 200 votes.
Well,
except in 2020, when I would call 2020 election an aberration.
So that was between Favour and Venetia.
Yes.
Right. So
and it's
50
and the change, the shift in Eastern St. Andrew was in keeping with the national shift, where we saw almost every constituency losing close to 2,000 votes.
Yeah, because
for the PNP.
There, she won by a good margin. It was 39% of the votes going to Venetia, with 59% roughly going to Favour. So, but how do you plan to change that though? Because when you run the comparison,
think the overall country has determined that is to be changed. When we say time come, it really means time come. I think the national swing is clear that the Jamaicans are now fully disenchanted with the quality of governance that we have had and the outcomes that have been produced. When you look at our roads, when you look at our hospitals, when you look at our education system, when you look at national security, even with the gains made now with respect to the murder rate, there is still concern with the level of police killings in that space, right? So there is concern as to whether we are on the right track, and even with the economic, not growth, but economic stability, because there has been no growth. It's not translating to the people on the ground.
But when you say there's no growth, though, unpack that a little for us to understand. What do you mean when you say there has been no growth? You know.
Well, but the economic indicators is no growth. It's all of our growth has been under 1%. And in fact, last year we had a situation where we had some negative growth. So the only time where we had any significant growth is a recovery from COVID, where we had significant decline after 2020. So the economy has not grown. So our productivity has gone down. And even though we say we have almost near full employment based on what they are suggesting, there is a large number of people who are not looking for jobs because they have lost hope. You have 700,000 people in Jamaica who are not looking for an employment. That is a real problem.
So you're saying that they are not looking for employment because they have lost hope as opposed to something else?
Yeah, because where are they going to find a job? There's no availability of jobs. Jobs are not abound in Jamaica.
So what was said, and if I'm not mistaken, it was said by Mark Golding that Jamaica is, well, yes, there's low employment, but there's low skill and there's low wage. Would those be some of the reasons why persons are not looking to join the pool of employment?
Listen, if you are believing that you can get employed, you would seek employment because you would prefer not to not eat. You know, at the same time, when we're talking about this full employment, we still have a statistic that says 58% of Jamaicans don't eat a nutritious meal every day. There are some who skip meals, there are some who don't eat every day. And which is the part of the reason why, as a party, and critical to even the visions that have come out of the community meetings that I've had, is that 1 meal per day to ensure that every child in our school system gets 1 meal per day.
So the impression that we could draw from that then is that not much has changed under either of the political parties then, because that was something that I've heard under the previous administration. I know that's the same thing, so not much has changed then.
You could say that, but you know, here I am now. I'm now in 2025. For the last 10 years, we have had a Jamaica Labour Party government. And prior to that, we had 4 years of a PNP government whose job was to fix the economy such that we could then have space to grow.
But prior to that, we had...
Yeah, but how far are we going to go back? We can't go back now we can't go back to 1838 and then we can't move it forward. So I would say to you, in the last 20 years, the JLP has been in power 16 years. And so therefore, the result of our 20 years would be dominated by JLP policy.
So the good and the bad and the ugly is based on JLP policies, that's what you're saying?
For the last 20 years, they have been in power. I'm not saying the good and the bad and the ugly is based on that. I'm saying the last 20 years, they have been in power for 16 of those 20 years. So they do have an impact on the outcome. And they are currently the government, and so all of the decisions that they take is currently causing the outcome that we are currently having. How
do you hold them to account, though? Because there are many persons who are criticizing the PNP to the extent that they're saying that they're not running on a credible platform. Instead, you're leaning on anti-corruption rhetoric. How do you respond to them? And can you list one tangible policy that would set your particular vision apart from that of, say...
I started with one a while ago, which was the EASE program, 1 nutritious meal per day for every child. Hungry children cannot learn. And if we continue on education, you're going to talk about the student loan. The policy that you will not pay back that loan at a rate greater than you can afford to pay it back. So the loan payment will be set relative to your salary, and you will pay back when you get a job. So it is about how to help you to move forward. The third thing would be that if you want social mobility, you're talking about upskilling and the ability for a family to earn. We're talking about the first in family policy. The first person to qualify for university in a family will get a full scholarship.
And that's going to be right across the board.
And that's right across the board.
So
yes. And then when you think, and then that's education. When you talk about another tangible one, you're going to talk about housing, right? The issue of young people not being able to afford housing and move out of their families' homes. The $500,000 grant to young persons, which is $1 billion, which once you put the $11 billion back into NHT, you can do it, right? To be able to pay down on a house towards their down payment. This is obvious, most times a hurdle for young people to be able to get started. And the second thing is to reduce the price of housing. So therefore, we're going to land bank in NHT, and then we're not going to pass on the price of that land to the consumer.
So in effect, you're putting subsidies in. So what happens?
Subsidies in housing. You know, so you can, because the way to fix the housing, right now, it's $40 million for a 1-bedroom apartment. If you are a young person, even if you do get to the place where you have a job, you can't afford that. So we have to subsidize that if we're going to expand. It's the same things we did with Portmore. Previous governments would have done with Portmore, with Mona Heights, Hope Pastures, all of the Karachi, Long Mountain, the expansion of your middle class requires making affordable housing available to them. So, and then there's the other one. You want another concrete one? We can't gear them in and we can't roll them off. It's land, the land reform. So, because we need to have all Jamaicans being able to own their own home. And the idea that we have of all of these unstructured settlements. And you know what I found interesting? Mona Commons. You know how Mona Commons come about? Everybody always calls Mona Commons in front of the hospital. You know how it come about? It was an indentured laborers settlement. That was where, when the Mona plantation was set up, then put the Indians to live. That was that settlement. So when people talk about it just come, it not just come, right? But the plantation owners got a chance to own their land. We now must facilitate others owning their land.
Just before we go to the break, you have made mention about the whole land titling exercise right across, especially for communities like Land Lease and Standpipe and Vietnam and those. You know, but what's your plan to make that promise real, and how will the Portia initiative that you spoke about, how will that play into that particular narrative?
Well, so the Portia initiative, a lot of it is based on the Operation Pride. Operation Pride ran into some problems because there were some administrative issues and there were some allegations of impropriety. But you can fix that because the essence of it was good. It is a way that you're going to facilitate the transfer of the lands. And because of the key initiative of our spokesperson on land that put forward in Parliament, where we're going to reduce the tenure from 60 years to 25 years. You're living on government land for 25 years, you can now apply for ownership of that land.
So as we ease into the break, now, I just leave you with a simple yes or no question. You're planning on revamping Operation Pride?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to go to a break. We'll continue in a couple of minutes. So in a battleground seat with real stakes, Patricia Duncan Sutherland offers not just criticism, but new contract, one grounded in community, clarity, and care. Whether the people of St. Andrew Eastern will sign on remains to be seen. Continue to stay with us. This is A Conversation. So we know that you have mentioned earlier the whole issue of the age limit for the workers. One of the things that have come to mind as soon as you started talking about that is that should I desire to work beyond the retirement age, what kind of policies, what can you put in place to ensure that my rights are protected so that I am not exploited, as well as broadening the pie so that those who feel as though that there's no space for a promotion, they can also still benefit? Right.
So in the context of protecting, there are two things, right? I think we need to strengthen the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. It doesn't serve women effectively right now. You still have that pay gap between men and women for the same job. So I think the same thing would happen with the elderly to the young.
That's as big an issue here, though,
in our
context?
Right now, Jamaican women earn 80% of what men earn for the same job. Yeah.
In 2025,
in 2025, that is what reality. But also, in addition to that, in the same way you have a children's advocate, you would want to have an elderly advocate. Because those roles now where you don't have the wherewithal to stand up for yourself, you have somebody to stand with you and to deal with the issues and the general issues that would affect. There's a third thing that needs to occur as you introduce your Elderly Care Act, is that you would need to have an elderly council. We have one now, but I think we need to strengthen it, that we would be continuously looking at the guidelines and the policies that we're putting in place to help the elderly in that space. Because things and times going to change, right? Eventually, you're going to become elderly. And when what you need, like right now, the elderly want post office to collect them check, you're not going to want no post office to collect your check. So you have to change your policies and
No,
your
but no,
structures
you're
to
transferring
support.
it to accounts. I know most of the elderly folks that I hang around, they're getting it in their account.
I know,
now.
but there are some, a lot in Jamaica who live in rural Jamaica who can't get it to their accounts. And when they get it to their accounts, they don't know how to operate with it. So that's what I'm just saying, you know, things will change, and eventually it will change, and one day that will no longer be the issue, but there will be some other issues to deal with, and we must always stay relevant to the needs, because there will always be differences in the needs. But, you know, I want to bring one thing in play, though. I want to, because the big basis for the social transformation is a family-centered approach to social work. You might have heard me talk about an army of social workers before. So when we are looking at elderly care, we're looking in the context of the whole overall family. And I define a family as children, parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents if they are alive. And that's one unit. And if you have a social worker working with the whole unit and helping them to navigate through the space and access what is available to them, we will have, first of all, better family values, because you will have them working together. And second, you'll have more social mobility, because you'll be, because when one person in a family is advancing, the whole family gets an opportunity.
But that sounds, no, don't mean to be pessimistic, but that sounds like a pie in the sky or a pipe dream. Why I say that is because majority of those who are in, say, social work, when they finish, they're looking to leave because the work is here, because there's more work than people, but then the pay is not as attractive, you know, to keep you in the space. So how would you fix that? That's one of the things, and I want to tie up all the questions together. So I want you to tell me also about the mindset, because one of the issues that we see, many of the policies that come about, they help the elderly, but they're somehow still treated as though they're dependents, all right? So you have advocated for partnership. What does that look like practically, say, in a government program that would help the social workers where they're getting more, and it would also help the family so they don't feel like they're dependents?
Yes. So a big part of it now is, in the context, is the training, right? So you have to have the training for the social workers. In terms of the pay, the one way to address pay, right, is that you have to increase it and make it a little more competitive. But in the context of who we have as social workers already, if we consolidate all of our social workers in Jamaica into one space, we have a greater chance of having a greater impact. Because we have social workers in NHT, we have social workers in Ministry of Health, social workers in SDC, social workers in Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Now, if we then took a view of a family and worked with a family, so a social worker moving from, connected from school into the community with the families and into the wider society, then I think we would have a greater impact. But to do this, you have to train them. This is not a novel idea. This is how they treat with social work in England. This is how they treat with social work in parts of Canada. It's not a novel idea, but I think something that we need. We talk about needing to strengthen our family structures. We have to be deliberate about it. And if we're talking about the partnership, to be able to help people to change their lives, we have a lot of government programs in place, but people don't know how to access them. And they don't know which one is most appropriate. And sometimes they're not designed effectively because they don't know what the people actually need. So
we're all but at the end of the program, and one of the last questions I wanted to answer for me before we leave. Some have argued that prioritizing elderly typically comes at the exclusion of youth with investments, as far as investments are concerned. How do you balance those interests, or better yet, how do you align those interests?
Well, I believe that one doesn't preclude the other. You have to balance all of those. And actually taking a family-centered approach would naturally balance everybody. However, the point is that you are going to make your allocations for your schools and for your children and for your youth. You're going to make your allocations for your training so that your youth can become more qualified and access more high-paying jobs. But you have to also create those jobs, so you also have to buttress your entrepreneurship class. And that is buttressed not just in youth, it's youth to the elderly.
That's a lot for us to consider. In a society too quick to retire its elders, Patricia Duncan Sutherland is proposing a different future where aging means contributing, not fading. Patricia, Thank you for joining us and sharing your bold vision. When we return, we welcome Dr. Sidney McGill, a clinical psychologist who will help us to unpack how screens and silence are shaping modern intimacy in Jamaican homes. Continue to stay with us. This is The Conversation. Welcome back to The Conversation. In this segment, we look at fractured intimacy, how screens, porns, and apps are reshaping Jamaican relationship. For this segment, we're going to be speaking with family and sex therapist, Dr. McGill. How are you, Sir Sidney? How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you for me. And you?
Yes, I'm fine. Happy for having you on The Conversation. One of the things that I've always wanted to have a discussion about, well, in recent years rather, is the rise of screen-based technology, especially smartphones, for example, and how those are changing the nature of our dating culture, essentially, and intimacy in Jamaican relationships.
Yeah, well, there's this increasing screen dependency. Because of the proliferation of smartphones, almost everyone has access to the internet. And what that has done is to reduce face-to-face communication. And, you know, if you are in an intimate relationship, face-to-face communication is integral to the development of that relationship. Mm-hmm. And that tends to lead to emotional distance. Yeah, so you know, I'm sure you've seen, I've heard of, you know, one partner is in the bedroom and the other partner is in the living room, and they are texting each other, yeah, instead of going
having a
and
real
talk
communication.
Yes.
Yeah.
So right. So it's reducing face-to-face communication. The other thing too is that what it's doing is the way how people are meeting now. You know, in fact, one person said to me the other day that he's afraid of trying to meet someone face to face. That, for example, a girl that he sees he likes, and he'd like to, you know, say hi to her and, you know, begin a conversation and hope that it goes somewhere. But he said he's afraid of that because he might be seen as, he might be accused of sexual harassment. And so it is so much easier for him, it's safer for him to meet someone on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, yes?
Yeah.
And take it from there. It really seems to be a safer zone, it really isn't, than the actual face-to-face pro-social interaction, which is what is healthier, by the way.
So I'll just change gear a second because I might definitely be coming back to that. But you have spoken about pornography addiction. What are some of the clinical or better yet, the behavioral signs that it's affecting men's sexual function, you know, and relational health?
Well, addiction is the overarching problem. Addiction, in that for men, just imagine you're looking at a porn, yeah, and the porn is set up in such a way, and it's the whole, you know, how it's done, with men who are, you have six packs, yes, and women who are beautifully shaped and and quite done up nicely, and so it's as if this is the ideal sexual encounter. But I'm not having it. I'm just a voyeur. I'm just looking at it and wishing and hoping that I would have this kind of experience. But my day-to-day sexual experience is certainly not as exciting, certainly not as idealistic as I would want it to be. Now, just imagine that male enjoys watching porn.
Yes.
and a lot of times masturbates afterward because you're going to be sexually aroused, and you will have an erection and may masturbate. But on continuous watching of porn, what is evident of late is what they call PIED, which is porn-induced erectile disorder or dysfunction. And what it means is that the person gets so used to being excited sexually, watching porn, that in real life sexual encounter, it is a lot tamer for him. He doesn't get the kind of intense excitement, with a physical partner, and so it takes him a longer time to get an erection. And a lot of time, when he does get the erection is not a strong, hard erection, and that soft erection, sometimes he loses it during sexual intercourse
because he's not as attracted to the person in front of him vis-a-vis the person that would be on the screen.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because looking at the screen is a passive act. You're just looking and receiving excitement from it. With an actual person encounter, it's more than just looking. You have to be doing, yes, and you have to be interacting with your sex partner, yeah, and it puts more, what you'd say, it's more effort, and more is required of him. When watching porn, you just sit back passively and watch it.
So could I then argue that there's a component of instant gratification that he's not going to be getting with the individual in front of him as opposed to the person that's on the screen? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. He has to work for it.
Whoa.
And yeah. And so, plus because he's been watching so much porn and been having less actual sex with a person, he does not have the skills. He has not developed the pro-social skills necessary for the relationship to build, for the sexual encounter to be, exciting and enjoyable. I'm not saying that all men are like that.
But
I'm
Doc,
just saying
what would be some of those pro-social skills, though, that he would need to develop?
Well, for example, one, when it comes to foreplay, it's a gradual build-up. Does he know how to sexually turn on the woman to the point where she has she's ready for penetrative sex, which means moist, having a moist vagina? Or is he, because he's so accustomed to instant gratification, he may just, not know what it takes to arouse a woman. And so he just thinks that a lot of times he just needs to just get his thing done, which is to
just jump in, boom, boom, boom.
Jump in, boom, boom, thank you, ma'am.
Wow.
And then to listen to his sex partner, she knows what she wants, and she may ask for what she wants. Does he understand her body terrain? I use that term, that's my term. Yeah. Body terrain, meaning the woman's body, naked body. There are different parts of her body that has different sensations. The nape of her neck, her nipples, her vulval area, her side, in between her legs. And those sensations vary depending on the level of intense excitation, pleasure that she's receiving. So it really means that he has to be conversant or be, to know the partner that he's with and how to please his partner while I'm assuming that this partner will also be trying to please him. So it's a complex encounter when watching porn is just voyeurism. You know, it's just sitting there and watching two people perform.
But wouldn't he still have this particular issue? Let us say that he was having this relationship, this intimate encounter with someone who was never engaged in that particular act before, or he himself has never engaged in that particular act before, and he just happened upon it. You know, wouldn't that still be the same kind of awkwardness that you have described earlier? Wouldn't he still be encountering those? How might that be different than someone who is a voyeurist, who is accustomed to just watching others, whether it's on screen or somewhere else?
Yeah, well, everything has a beginning. We all are beginners at some point. So the initial learning as a young person, say a late teenage, young adult male, they have to learn, and they're going to make mistakes, you know, in the physical interaction with their potential sex partner, and so by making mistakes, they learn.
So couldn't the argument be then that I am so afraid of making those mistakes that I might not engage in the act, so I prefer to just sit and watch? Because
absolutely,
you know, it's a matter of ego now.
Absolutely, it's about giving up. It's about finding the least resistance, which is porn watching. Yeah, I mean, if I can watch porn and get more or less a great amount of pleasure versus having to go through the whole routine of, not routine, but the whole method, a process of getting my partner to be relaxed and comfortable with me and to appreciate me being their sex partner. Yeah, it's a bit more complex. We all, you know, learning it is natural until the technology has made it, given us an alternate way of pleasing ourselves.
I'm looking now, especially with the advent of COVID, where, you know, you realize that there's an almost an instant proliferation of screens. And so most of us have become voyeurs, you know, voyeurists. We're into that, where we're able to watch things, whether it's a movie or whatnot. Yes. There are some persons who might feel more comfortable to watch it, whether they're watching it together to achieve that particular end. So instead of going through foreplay, they decide to sit and they watch it together until both of them are at that place where they're just ready to just jump over the cliff now. Is there something missing from that part of the relationship?
Listen, I really think that diversity, doing different things to keep the relationship going and to enhance your sexual experience is fine. You experiment, etc. All of that is good. But when you're thinking of not just having sex, and you're thinking of making love, you're thinking of deepening and expressing your love to your partner, and I'm assuming that this partner is a committed, you're in a committed love relationship.
Yes.
Then it's the act of knowing your partner inside out. That should be everybody's goal in a loving relationship. So it means, which means you're taking risks. You're going to be doing something or saying something that your partner may not like.
Yeah.
But you learn from that and you improve. Now, just watching porn, the couple watching porn, and no, men tend to be visually more stimulated than women.
Yeah.
Right. And so she might not be as excited about it.
Well, she could read something while he watches something. So I'm not
very
sure.
True. Yes, that sounds like a better a better composition.
So,
Yes, she could do that. But why? Why do that? Why do that when the goal is to get to know me better,
yes.
get to explore my body, get to have intense sexual orgasms with me from start to finish? You can't have to prepare. So let's prepare for it and let's enjoy. It's a process.
So we're afraid to
not just
put
a
in the work. That's what you're
destination.
saying?
Pardon?
You're saying that we're afraid to put in the work to get the work done?
Exactly. I call that gross indiscipline.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gross indiscipline.
It's and I mean I'm saying what is discipline? Discipline is doing the right thing in spite of how you feel. You know? And so I'm thinking in a sexual encounter, you know, what's important to you should not just be what you want to do and how you want to feel, but what your partner wants.
Yes.
How can you excite and pleasure your partner? Yes? And not just because when you're watching the porn, it's about you. So you're pretty, pretty centric, pretty egocentric.
Egocentric.
Yes. When you're with your partner, you should be more partner-centric. That's the big difference.
But all right, so that there's a growing concern though that many couples, especially those over 45, are reporting decreased intimacy. Why do you believe that this is happening?
You know, I think that a lot of couples who have been in a relationship for an extended period, they're not conscious. In other words, they don't consciously grow the relationship. So in other words, if I'm in a relationship and I am relaxed and I know what I want, I mean, I just do what I want and not necessarily what my partner wants. You see, and so if for example, you look at a business has a motto, it has a vision statement and the other mission statements. The relationship that you're in, if this is an important relationship that you want to have with you for the rest of your life, you need a mission statement, you need a vision statement, you need a motto, stuff to keep you, just to guide you back when you start going off the rail. And so I'm saying then, yes, you know, the relationship needs to, you need to be working at it.
So
consciously
there's
working at it.
some more level of intentionality is required then. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
So wow. So you have mentioned though that that this particular shift has led to more extramarital activities, you know, and mistrust. Is Jamaica witnessing a quiet erosion of commitment in relationships?
I think so. This is just anecdotal. I really think so from my practice. Because as good as the technology is in giving you easy access to a lot of things, a lot of information, what it also does, the easy access to hooking up, the easy access, which is, you know, the ultimate, what's going to happen is infidelity, you know, and eventual divorce or separation because of the easy access. I mean, almost, to be honest with you, almost every couple that I see, and I see a lot, yeah, they all speak about, they complain about their partner, if not hooking up with another person, but the other person that they're flirting with, that partner's flirting with, is sending pictures of their genitals, yes, or nude photos, and you know, those are usually you lock them away, so hoping that your partner will not be aware of what you're going on with. But somehow, usually, you know, it becomes revealed, and then it becomes a major problem because it's you're deceiving me.
But others in your field, others in your field have argued that just even the threat of being cheated on is sometimes enough to hold you to ensure that you keep that relationship spicy, because you don't want to, anybody to go outside, because when you close the shop, sometimes wholesale's open.
Yeah, I'm not quite into that. I really think that threat. I don't believe you should be making decisions out of fear, because that's what threat is.
Mm-hmm.
You make decisions out of love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's just an inferior perspective, I think, of trying to maintain a relationship by the fear of being found out. Yeah. That is why I'm saying intentionally, you need to build your relationship and make it the best.
Yes.
When I say make it the best, build a relationship from a carnal flesh relationship to an emotional relationship where, you guys are so committed emotionally, you're empathetic, you're understanding your partner, and then taking it even further to a spiritual relationship. Yes? Where there's a lot of, I call, synchronicities. So one partner can be 1,000 miles away and something is happening with the other partner,
and
he or she picks up on that. Yes.
Wow.
That's a relationship that is deepening.
That sounds like something from a book, though. I mean, that still happens, though, in your practice. Have you encountered anybody?
Yeah, I've encountered me.
But you sound like the exception, though. But I won't give you an opportunity to answer that yet. I'll just go to the break, and when we come back, you can always answer that one. Just to remind you that you are watching The Conversation. I'm speaking now with Dr. Sidney McGill. He's a professional psychologist, a family and sex therapist. Continue to stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Conversation. In this segment, this is the final segment of our show, we are looking at raising digital natives, where porn, parenting, and the role of the church is concerned. So we want to talk about children, Dr. McGill. What are you seeing in terms of age and frequency when it comes to exposure to pornography in Jamaica?
Okay, for children, it's early, much early exposure to pornography. And I'm saying much early, I'm thinking from 3 years old.
No, man, say that slowly. What you mean? So you're saying, am I to understand that children, babies, because a 3-year-old is essentially a toddler, is being exposed to pornography at that age and stage?
Yes, and even some misguided parents, especially the men. And if it's a 3-year-old boy, and he can't, and the boy doesn't refuse to go to bed or to sleep. He just give up and let the boy sit there and watch it with him. And so I think porn is becoming so ubiquitous. It's becoming such a daily fear. It is losing the kind of Christian immorality that we attach to watching it, because it's become such a natural thing. It's second nature to watch porn.
Well, persons have argued that sex is natural. So because it's natural, then why hide it? But what is it that you're saying differently from what those would be saying?
I'm saying that children are not emotionally developed to deal with the intense emotional things that happen in a relationship, in an intimate relationship. There's no way ready at all, not even in the early teenage years. And to be exposing a child who well, the natural reaction of a child is to turn their noses up at porn, you know? And so that's a natural reaction. 12-year-old, that's a natural reaction. But if they're being exposed from early, then they're going to try this thing out. I remember when I was growing up, we played Dolly House, and Dirty Pot, and thing, right? And the thing was to replicate what we saw in the house. So there's some homes where the just one room, and mother and father and children live in the one room, and the mother and father have sex. They have to have sex, and so the children are exposed, even live sex from early, and they might be pretending that they're sleeping,
but they're not.
Yes, but they're not. So they're exposed early. What does that mean? It means that you're going to end up having child pregnancies, early pregnancies, and the child's life is basically,
ruined or derailed, I should say.
Yes, because of, But then there's all,
Tell me now, so what you have brought me to is the whole idea of the hypersexuality now, because they're potentially being exposed to it at home in some of those instances, whether it's on screen or in person. And then some persons have argued for and against the music and then the movies and all of those things. What are some of the implications to that level of early access to explicit content that will help to shape a child's emotional development, mental health, and understanding of intimacy?
Yeah. Another disadvantage other than pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy, is the child objectifies the other gender.
Couldn't they also objectify themselves too?
Well, I don't know, but it's easy to say, there is a sex object there walking by. Yes, and I've seen it happen so often, where you're in the town and a sex-crazed youngster, certainly not more than about 18, 19, 20, sees a lovely woman walking by, and he starts is stalking her and telling her how she look good, and she doesn't want this man around her, and so he sees it as a potential object for pleasure, and so he's pursuing it not as a person, not seeing her as a person, but as an object of pleasure. So that's not good. The other thing is aggression, because sex in this case is less about love and more about meeting my sexual needs. Then there's this urge and demand to have sex, and aggressive sex too. I mean, without even caring about how that partner is responding to the sex activity. Yeah, it's what I want. And so can you see what's going on here? That sex is supposed to be gelling a relationship, and in fact it is being used to abuse, to get what I want in spite of what's happening with my partner.
Yeah, so I understand, and while I understand that though, one of the things that I was tempted to ask a while ago, but I wanted you to complete the thought. So it sounds a little gendered when you make that particular statement, and here's why I say that. So growing up, we have heard of catcall. You see a man would see a lady passing, "Psst, baby," and he would call to her. But then I asked about the women objectifying themselves as well because of what they would have been exposed to, and objectifying themselves to the extent that they might now have a lesser esteem of who they are. And so they respond in a particular way, and now sex becomes transactional because she's using what she has to get what she wants. How is that different from the man?
Thank you for balancing out.
Yes.
Yes, because, when we look at women and how not just porn watching, but also the social media and how it has made women feel less valued, that their bodies are not never perfect, because you look at in Facebook, you see everybody's trying to present themselves to be looking better than they actually are in a, on a day-to-day basis. So she objectifies herself because somehow she doesn't have the big bottom that some of these women in the porn videos have.
Yeah.
She doesn't have the full breast that the others have. She might not have the kind of color, because a lot of these women in the sex videos, they are light, they're brown color. You don't see it, but you usually don't see them very black, but they're there. Yeah, but there's a proliferation of the ideal, type of looking woman, and she
Yes.
does not fit at all
That
in
narrative.
that kind of caricature.
So you have noted, though, in articles and so on, that many children now rely on devices for emotional regulation. All right, so the question that I want to ask, and that, what are some of the long-term implications, on this for family, for example, for family and social development?
That's a good question. Well, let's look at what's happening. I think what really is happening is that you do have more parent-child conflicts. You do have decline in academic performance and work performance as well. Because of screen addiction with TikTok, gaming, and then not only that, but I have found that with the kind of ethos of the technology, that not just children, but everybody's attention span is getting less and less and less. There's a deficiency in awareness, a lessening in attention. We can't, first you could sit and watch pastor preach for an hour and a half, 2 hours. No, I mean, I'm thinking, I suspect some pastors still do that, but we now know that 15 minutes is enough time. After that, the focus wanes, and so you'll find that then that what I think is needed is, how do we train the mind? How do we reclaim our attention and our self-awareness? That is what I'm grappling with. What kind of methods we have in place to do that? I might not be answering your question properly because I've forgotten some of what you were saying. So I'm just ad-libbing here.
All right, no man. So one of the things, and I'm happy that you brought up the church. I recognize that time is against us now, but the church has traditionally been vocal about sexual morality, or the lack thereof. But you argue that preaching is not enough. So my question is, what should a modern, responsive church look like in this digital age as far as that is concerned?
Okay, I'm going to sound a bit controversial, if you don't mind. Yes. I think, one, that there has to be public health discourse. I think we have to talk more about it. And I'm glad that you offered me the opportunity to speak about it. There need to be more media houses that are willing to talk about this thing, because it's hidden. It's hidden. And the more you hide stuff, is the more it proliferates, the more it causes you a lot of problem, the more you become enslaved by it. So I think that the church needs to start calling a spade You know, when you're talking about penis and vagina, you speak about penis and vaginas because we all have one or the other. Yeah. And to understand, I mean, put boundaries in as to how the penis and vagina should operate. In order, what's the purpose of putting in these boundaries? So as to maintain or to develop proper family structures, proper communities where we respect each other. I mean, whether it's our body or our opinions, and so that we have less division and we have more community and more social collateral, social capital to keep us when we can't afford, you know, we don't have the money. So I'm just saying the church, one, needs to
Speak more openly about it.
speak more openly about it.
Yes.
The church needs to garner the young people, have different interesting kinds of activities, so that young people are in groups and learning how to socially interact with each other rather than what we see happening now, social isolation taking place.
But
I think that the church needs to teach digital literacy, and teach that to the adults, to the parents. Have digital literacy programs. So, because parents need to know how to maneuver the internet, the social media, and all the other platforms that children are inclined to use.
But Dr. McGill, though, I mean, we're pretty much at the end of this discussion for now. But isn't that expecting too much of the church? Because, and here's why I asked that question: the church is merely a microcosm of society, and let's be honest, sex is not something that we openly speak about in society. It's not a run-of-the-mill conversation, that's one. And two, most parents are lagging behind the digital natives as far as using the screens are concerned. So I would assume that the church is also in the same predicament, because it's mostly adults in church, and you know, they're the ones who we are expecting now to teach and talk about something that they themselves might not even be au fait with. So some of them they're gonna be skirting around the issue because society skirts around the issue. We don't have those open, honest, transparent conversations. So what are some pointers that you can give us as we leave today, you know, that would help us to be better off, to be more comfortable to have those kinds of discussions?
If the church's responsibility is, if the church is in the business of transforming lives, it has to deal with these things. It has to deal with pornography and the access of it. It has to deal with, as I said before, digital literacy, set up programs for members or people in the church so that they can learn how to properly have parental controls and monitoring of their children's use of these devices. Yeah, I think it's about learning the technology and how to use it well. Recognizing that it has both positive and negative attributes, and guiding your children how to use it so that only largely positive attributes they receive from their devices.
Yes.
Now, when I said I wanted to be controversial, I feel I am a meditator. And for years I've been meditating. And I found that because I'm meditating, my focus is sharper. Yeah. I have greater self-discipline when it comes to my thought, what I'm thinking of. And I believe that Jesus, I mean, one of my study of Jesus is that under no account should you harbor negative thoughts. So I'm learning to love even my enemies, as Jesus says. And so, you know, it's about learning the technology. I'm just repeating myself. Learning the technology, how to use the technology so that you don't feel embarrassed or feel that the child knows more than I should. Well, yes, the child will naturally know more because the child has been grown up in that kind of technological environment. Yeah, so, but parents need to at least find a, equalize up with the knowledge of their children. And
Wow.
they can. And the church certainly is an institution. Mark you, the Ministry of Education, the government needs to take on that role as well. But the church has specifically when it comes to the whole thing of transforming lives, it has to get into these nitty, including sexual orientation.
Yes.
Not yeah. Okay.
So all right. So you have given us a lot to consider now, and we're definitely going to be having this conversation at a later date. So I just want to thank you again, Dr. McGill. The truths that you have shared today, they leave us with much to ponder, not just about screens and systems, but about the spaces that we create for our children to grow.
Yeah.
So thank you again for making the time out to have this particular discussion with us. All right. So we'll talk at some later point in time, and thank you again.
You're welcome.
So, we'll just go for the break. We'll just go for the break. Thank you again, Dr. McGill. The truths that you have shared today leaves us with much to ponder, not just about screens and systems, but about the spaces we create for our children. As the line between physical and digital worlds continue to blur, our challenge is clear: to build a culture of intentionality, mentorship, and care. Until next time, this has been The Conversation. So let's just have the... Yes? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Yeah, man. Yeah, I can hear you now, but you're not saying anything. All right, so... No, man, so when I'm finished, yeah, so let me just do the outro, and then we go to the break, and then when I come back, we can talk to Mrs. Duncan Sutherland. You hear me? So where we start from? Yes, I'll start from here. Give me a countdown. As the lines between physical and digital worlds continue to blur, our challenge is clear: to build a culture of intentionality, mentorship, and care. Until next time, this has been The Conversation.